Hey everyone, it's Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys a brand new 2025 album review. And as you can see below the title, today we're going to be talking about the new album from Testament entitled Bellum, which is out now through Nuclear Blast Records. Now, everybody should probably have heard of Testament. I don't think I really need to go into much detail that hasn't been said already. Been around since the early to mid 80s from California. Part of the whole Bay Area thrash scene. I put him up there with Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer. You're in Exodus. And these guys been putting out albums, of course, since such as like Legacy, New Order, Souls of Black, and stuff. And Testament definitely has evolved over the years. Like they always have the thrash stuff, but it wasn't until like the mid 90s or so where they experimented with more kind of extreme metal, even like going into like death metal with albums such as like Demonic or even The Gathering, which I thought was a very underrated album too. And this, of course, is the band's, I believe, 13th or 14th album, and this follows up their previous album, Titans of Creation, which came out 5 years ago. And with this album, does it live or exceed what Titans of Creation has? In my honest opinion, I think it definitely has. I think the band has stepped it up. Like, it's crazy. Like, these guys are even in their 60s, and they still sound as tight as ever. The production on this album is great. I think that it really like sonically just fits within the context of every song. And then the vocal work. Let's just talk about the vocals from Chuck Billy. I think this is probably the best he's sounded to date. He still has that like classic like thrash metal voice that he has on like the early like albums from like the 80s, but even showing the hints of like the death metal vocals, like even on like the the Gathering, which I think was just I just don't know how he does it. He's just really sick, and I just love like the two contrasts within his voice is just perfectly spot on. And then guitar wise, Alex Skolnick and Eric Peterson both come up with some really great riffs. Just the riffs that Eric comes up with are great. And then the soloing from Alex, I think both of them come up with like really great riffs. And I feel like they both complement to each other really well. And then the bass on this album is pretty audible. Like Steve DiGiorgio, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated metal basses of all time. Just like the way he plays it, his bass and everything is perfect. Like he pretty much fits in within the context of the song, and I just really wish people would praise Steve more, and I think he's a really great bassist. And drumming wise, this is also the first album with a new drummer. We're stepping in to, of course, Gene Hoglan, and even after that they had Dave Lombardo rejoin the band, but he couldn't commit. So instead on this album they have a new drummer. He's actually a friend of mine, Chris Stovis, who used to play for the band Seven Spires, and I think Chris does a really great job on the drums. He injects like a new kind of like energy within Testament. Like and he's the youngest member. He's like 27 or so, and he's just really insane on the drums on here, which is just, I don't even know how to describe it. I just think he's a great fit with like, of course, like living up to like Gene Hoglan or even Dave Lombardo. So without further ado, let's dive into this album track by track. Now, starting things off is For the Love of Pain. Now, this kicks off the album with a bang. Has some really fast and furious thrash with also kind of like hints of like the black metal influence. Like, because I know like Eric Peterson had a band called Dragon Lord on here. And there's even like the sections that feel like an epic kind of like wave blasting thing. And Testament has experimented with this sound before, and it does sound like I mentioned, of course, Eric Peterson's solo project Dragonland. And I just think the blackened elements give this sound sort of like a kick in the ass for sure. And I think it's a pretty good way to start off the album. Next up is Infanticide AI. Now, just like the last song, this song keeps sort of like the blackened kind of like elements for like a raging thrasher, and the riffs just fly in every way from both Alex and Eric right here, and Chuck right here just sounds really insane. And then the drums and blast, and it just rips you in a new asshole for sure. But I feel like this pretty much shows like these guys can still bring it hard when they want to, and it's a really good song. Next song on the album is Shadow People. Now, musically, this song is like the most old school sounding Testament song today. And it has that kind of like 80s era vibe, kind of like Practice What You Preach or shit like that. Has some really great riffs, and vocally Chuck just sounds like he does in the 80s. Like, and the band like behind it, like the instrumentation is just really catchy. Like the guitars, the bass and drums, everything is just perfect. Now, moving on to Meant to Be. Now, this is actually where the album slows down a little bit, and this is actually a ballad. Is the kind of song, and is the band's like first true ballad in many years. And I feel like Testament kind of really isn't a stranger with these ballads. Like they even have a song called "The Ballad," and I just think that this song is just great. Right, and the use of the acoustic guitars and the kind of like the orchestral kind of like vibes like makes this one of the most unique songs in the Testament catalog. But it just packs a punch when the guitars come in and take over with the harmonies and everything. And it's just one thing that shows like Eric and Alex just continue to showcase is just their songwriting skills. And Meant to Be is a really great kind of song for that. Now, Noon is a pretty good song. Now, it starts off with Chuck sort of like introducing the song, has like just no music in the background, but then the rest of the band comes in. It just has some really frenzied riffs between like Eric and Alex, and then it just really, the way that they play together, like I said, just complements it perfectly. And then Chris comes in, adding the punch with the drums, and Steve's bass lines is just, this song is just pretty as good as anything that they produced in years. And then we get to Witch Hunt. Now, this track kind of like starts off with kind of a very kind of like black metal-y, kind of like winter riff. And it just winds up, in my opinion, the heaviest song on here, which kind of reminds me a lot of like the Demonic kind of album, like something it would be from that. And then we get to Nature of the Beast. Now, I feel like this is pretty much Testament going into like sleaze metal territory, where you, like the lyrics are just, this is pretty much where the album kind of like hit a brick wall right here. And I just think it's just cringy, like lyrically just talking about going to like Vegas and like gambling and stuff. Just kind of like sounds something like fucking Guns N' Roses would come out with, but which is pretty much my least favorite song on the album, to be honest. But then it pretty much gets right back on track with Room 117. Now, this album groove right there is just, it's just slick. It just locks in. It has some really memorable songwriting that just locks in. It's just a good blend of the vintage Testament and classic metal, and it just puts off perfectly with the great vocal hooks and great guitar work. And the chorus in here is just really great. Reminds me of something from Practice What You Preach. Havana Syndrome. Now, this has like another ring of early Testament, and I just think it's an early contender for the song that people will love the most, and with this so far, I just think it's impossible to choose. And I just think like the songs on here are very unique, and like the structure, the key, and sort of like the whole vibe that they come up with. And then we close things out with the title track, Parabellum, which it closes this album with true Testament fashion, with the thrashing reefs, beasting vocals, and just the really great solos. And it just ends with a really great clean guitar passage played by Eric, and I think it's a good way to end the album. Now, overall, Parabellum by Testament, pretty good album. I really like it. So if I had to give this album a score, I'm gonna give Parabellum by Testament a solid 8.5 out of 10. So that's my review of the new Testament album, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal.